So if the governor isn't here in a second, why don't I ask you the...
Oh, here she is. She's right here.
Here she is.
Governor
Joining
Maura
us
Healey.
now is the Commonwealth governor wearing a UMass Boston vest. That'd be Maura Healey. Hello, Governor Healey. It's a pleasure to see you.
It's great to be with you both, and really, really great to be here
I know, it's
at
gorgeous.
UMass Boston. Yes. Look at all these people. It's awesome.
I know.
Just saw the chancellor, who's fantastic, tremendous leader. Gina McCarthy, what a great show.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah,
Paul
sorry
English
it's all
was
going to
here.
go downhill now.
Well, maybe it will, but you can do your best and it'll be fine.
But
We're
you
really
know,
glad you're here, Governor.
I mean,
Thank you.
The thing of this,
You're
it's
right,
on, it's on,
sunglasses?
well, but the sun is
the
really,
hell?
I know I look ridiculous.
No, you
but
know, I
the
didn't say
sun-
that. It just was a different
Well, actually,
look.
I'm trying to look cool, Governor, but the sun really bothers my eyes, and it's sunny out
Okay,
there, as you can
okay,
see. So
great. Oh.
that's why I got the sunglasses.
Can I make
So
a
forgive
suggestion?
me.
We didn't intend to start with this, but since we were discussing accessory dwelling units while the governor's walking in, why don't we start with the housing bond bill? Do you want to do that?
Yeah, well, tell people, I mean, we hear this all the time, that people can't afford the rent, they can't afford to buy a house, older people aren't selling their houses because with the interest rates higher, they can't move. We got a real lock on the housing market in Massachusetts. But you got this bill, this housing bill that's sitting up at the legislature, and we hate to be pessimistic. Sometimes things sit indefinitely at the legislature. We have 3 months until they end their session. But tell people about the bill and what I was talking about before, the granny flats that are part of this bill.
You know, I think the number one issue facing our state is housing. Rents are too high. People can't afford down payments. People can't afford to downsize because the prices are so high. And it is the reason that people are leaving the state. It's the reason why the fastest growing number of people leaving the state are in the 20 to 30 something age category. I mean, I don't know how many listeners have young people living at home or return from school to live at home because they can't afford to live anywhere else. So this is a problem. Massachusetts is a great state. We have so much going for us, but we also have really high housing costs. So what do we do about that? We need to build more housing. I've said that no one city or town can solve this problem on their own, that everybody needs to participate, which is why I filed a bill. It's a $4 billion bond bill. It allows us to go out and borrow money to help spark the kind of production that we need to drive prices down. One of the policy ideas that I strongly support is allowing communities to create accessory dwelling units, which is an automatic way, an easy way to quickly, overnight, add housing stock to a community. So there's a lot there. We've had a lot of good conversations with the legislature. It's already been through a couple of hearings, so you know, I'm optimistic we'll get something done here, but it is really, really important. It's interesting too, you know, I talk about regular people, and I also talk about, like, you know, heads of companies and what they tell me, and their recruiting teams tell me. As you know, I'm really focused on life sciences and innovation and climate technology and all of that. The number one challenge for companies expanding here, growing here, settling here is their ability to attract and retain talent, and that turns on housing, they tell me. So we've got to deal with this, and I'm optimistic we can get there. It is absolutely the top priority for our state.
Are you optimistic because you're optimistic kind of person, or are you optimistic because you actually think they're going to do this in 3 months?
I think we all understand in office how pressing the needs are for families, for residents across the state. It's not just a greater Boston issue. This is a statewide, it's a national issue too.
Yep.
I talked to other governors, everybody's dealing with a high cost of housing, but you know, I think we've got a plan here that we can implement that will make a lot of sense and make a difference.
Okay, so you have to explain one thing to me. There are two provisions that I know require a little bit of courage. You would not use that word, I will, on the part of people on Beacon Hill. One is voting for these accessory dwelling unit things, because basically it makes them as of right, and their local folks back home can't stand in the way, which I know Marjorie and I think is a wonderful idea. We usually don't endorse your proposals, but we will endorse that one. The second thing that I don't understand the problem with it all is part of your deal, correct me if I'm wrong, is the real estate transfer tax on more expensive dwellings over $1 million. In light of the fact, and I might be wrong here, that doesn't require the city and town to implement that tax, but rather gives them that as an option, and then they democratically, small d, decide to do it. What is an argument against doing that?
No, I'm not really sure, because it is about local control at the end of the day. What it does is remove the extra step of having to go to the legislature and get approval for something like a transfer fee. You know, our view is let's put all the tools out there. You know, let's have a menu of options in terms of policy moves that we can make as a state, that communities can make. And that's what we did in this housing bond bill, which is called the Affordable Homes Act. And so that's one of any number of things we've suggested.
Apparently, we have our first audience question with Meg, who wants to know about the high cost of childcare and universal preschool.
Welcome, Meg.
Pre-K, excuse me, in Massachusetts.
Hi.
Meg. Thank you
Hi.
for joining us.
Hi, I'm an educator and a mom, and I have a question about childcare and education. I was deeply disturbed when I read the governor was perpetuating accusations against student protesters, including Jewish students, of anti-Semitism without evidence in order to justify the violent police response. Weaponizing false accusations of anti-Semitism to silence protest against genocide is dangerous and manufactures consent for violence against student protesters. It's worrisome to see our Democratic politicians and media personalities engaged in the same tactics as the far right, while ignoring the 15,000 children that have been murdered by Israeli forces.
Meg,
and
can I ask
many
you-
more
Meg, I have
facing
to ask a question.
extreme injury and trauma with our tax dollars and our tuition dollars.
Meg, all
My
I'm gonna ask you-
question for the
Fine,
governor
okay.
is, why are you protecting the funding of genocide over the well-being of students in the Commonwealth? And how can you claim to care about children and students if you're playing dangerous political word games instead of addressing the ongoing genocide? Thank you.
Before you answer, can I just say one thing, if I may, before the governor responds? People who want to speak to the governor do not need to lie to our staff about what you want to talk about. If you want to talk about Gaza and you tell them, you're welcome on the show. If you want to talk about childcare, you're welcome on the show, but please don't lie to our coworkers about why you want to be here. Meg, you're done.
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
the care
You
of
made your point.
children is why I'm here.
Okay,
Sorry,
fine.
child care,
Okay,
care
got
of
it.
children,
Thank you, Meg.
very similar
You asked
things.
the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Governor.
Well, there's a lot there. Let me start with childcare. And one thing that I've been clear about, and our administration has been clear about, is that childcare is actually an economic underpinning. Okay? If we want economic growth and development, we want people, particularly women, back in the workplace, we have got to solve the high cost, the challenge of childcare. And so one of the things that we've done is last year and again this year in our budget, we are looking to provide historic levels of funding to continue the funding that the federal government gave us through the COVID years, to continue that level of funding so that we can open up and have more child care providers in place around the state, so that we can raise the salaries for child care providers, including some who are educated here at the great University of Massachusetts, Boston, so that we have more seats available, so that more families are able to send their kids to child care and go to work and go about their lives. So it's really, really important to us as an administration. We recognize how important childcare is. The other thing with that is we recognize how important education is for our littlest learners. And that is why we have proposed that we will make universal pre-K available to every 4-year-old in the state. We're starting in every gateway city by 2026. It is so, so important. Massachusetts, we're proud that we're home to the first public school in the country, the first public library in the country. We want to be first in education, and that starts with our littlest learners, and we've got to help our families. I know so many women. I ran the AG's office. I now run a little bit larger outfit. So many families are having to do a calculus at home. Do I go to work, right? Or is it cheaper for me and my family for me to stay home? That holds us back. It holds back our GDP. So we've got to deal with that, and I think that childcare is so, so important. And again, I've met a lot of folks who've been educated here at the University of Massachusetts in early education and childcare, and I appreciate that, and we want to support those providers, support those educators, and most importantly, support the children.
How about the other issue that was raised by Meg about the protesters, the arrests, the situation in Gaza?
Well, I think anyone with a heart sees the grief, sees the agony, sees the devastation, and feels for those who have been killed in Gaza, those who have been killed in Israel. It is incredibly agonizing and upsetting. It's also the case that we as a country, we as a people, as a state, and as a community, and I as your governor, am committed, as I was as head of the Civil Rights Division and your Attorney General, to fighting anti-Semitism, to fighting Islamophobia, to fighting racism, hatred, bigotry in all forms. I'll also say that we have a right to protest in this country, including on college campuses. It is also the case that there's a difference between protest and violence and threats of violence and disruption of students' access to safe education. That's what I have to say about this, and I will continue to speak with people who have differing views. It's important that we engage in a civil way and debate and have discourse and have discussion in this country about policies. That's really important. That's who we are as Americans.
Governor,
It's also the case that some of what we are witnessing does not represent that, does not reflect that, and that will continue to be my position as governor. Again, I am focused on ensuring the safety of all involved, whether it's on campuses or elsewhere, and certainly pray for peace and pray for a greater understanding and greater dialogue in this time.
Governor, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Ed Markey, Bernie Sanders, a lot of others think that President Biden should have put conditions on the funding of military equipment going to Israel, that he shouldn't be just writing a check and letting Netanyahu decide how to use it. Do you think Biden should have set these conditions?
I think the president's been clear in calling for a ceasefire, something that I support. I think it's also clear that we should continue to support Israel with that funding.
Last
No
question.
conditions? No conditions?
I think the president has been clear with Israel and the prime minister about what should happen.
Last question on this, and then we'll get to the calls at 877-301-8970. Are you comfortable with how the police were used at Northeastern and Emerson?
Yes.
You are. Let's go to Ellie in Medford. Ellie in Medford, you are next. You're on. The governor answered your question, I thought, pretty respectfully, and we'd like to go to Ellie from Medford, who is on the phone at 877-301-8970. Ellie, welcome. You're on with the governor.
This is Emily from.
Oh, Emily, I'm so sorry. My fault. Hi, Emily.
No problem. I had a question for the governor. My husband is a healthcare worker who is currently working for Steward Healthcare, and we found out this week that his clinic is laying off and closing at the end of the month with no buyout from a physician group or anything like that. I wanted to know if the state had anything planned or programs that were available that are going to be helping the healthcare workers that are going to be affected by all of these hospitals and clinics closing.
Absolutely. And Emily, thank you so much for calling. Where does your husband work?
He works at a physical therapy.
A steward. Okay.
A steward.
Got it. So Emily, thank you for your question. And as folks know, we have this hospital system, Steward Healthcare, 8 hospitals around the state, big physician groups in a lot of places. And basically their CEO and their management team, which is out of Dallas, Texas, played really fast and loose and did things that were totally irresponsible and have put at risk those hospitals and patients and jobs and the like. So we have been on this now for weeks, for months. In fact, my Secretary of Health and Human Services has led the effort on this. And I've said from the outset, and Emily, this is to you and to your husband, our focus is on protecting patients and their access to care, protecting jobs. We've got 16,000 jobs like your husband's at risk, and protecting the stability of the healthcare market. I announced yesterday that we set up an incident command team. What we've been doing is going around with our Department of Public Health, which, by the way, is on site at all these hospitals, monitoring, because we want to ensure safe, quality care there. But we've been doing a series of regional planning meetings to talk with communities affected, to talk with other hospital systems, to make sure that we've got the right contingency plans in place so that patients are assured coverage, and also ultimately so that we know where workers are going to go. We're looking at a situation where Steward will be exiting Massachusetts, which is a very good thing. based on their completely unscrupulous behavior. And I'm not talking about steward doctors or nurses or administrators here in Massachusetts. I'm talking about management and their CEO, who we know, you've covered it, two yachts and everything else. So great, get them out of town. But in the meantime, it's like, how do you manage that orderly transition? Who's going to come in and take over? What is that going to look like? And it's something that we are committed to making sure that we manage as thoughtfully as possible, and that we work with our network of existing other hospital providers and other physician networks to make sure, again, that patients are covered, that workers are protected, and that the stability of the market is in place. And Emily, I will make sure, if you leave your number with the folks here at the studio, I'll make sure that you're connected to the right person at our Department of Public Health.
Emily, stay on the line. Our producers will get your contact information.
We certainly need your husband to continue work. As we know, healthcare is just another area where we've got real workforce challenges. And again, I was here at the nursing school not too long ago, another great program out of UMass Boston. We have so many, I say that my mom's a nurse and my grandmother too. We love our nurses, but across healthcare, we need people to continue to go into this and to help us fill this workforce. And certainly there's no shortage of jobs and opportunities right now.
Very quick, Emily, stay on hold. We have we got an email this morning. I don't know enough about the bankruptcy stuff and what your secretary is doing on these things. I know how much you're focused on it. Could we wake up tomorrow morning and find these hospitals closed? No. The way it works in this kind of situation is there's a whole process for managing these transitions, including in the event of bankruptcy, in the event that they stop paying their bills. It's not easy, Jim. It's a challenge, and that's why it's really galling to me that a bunch of, a selfish CEO did what he did and sucked money out of what are important, imperative community assets, right? Access to health care. Remember, this is an outfit, Steward, that came in years ago and bought the Caritas Christi hospital system that was on hard times, and then took over a bunch of these hospitals. And again, I have a lot of respect for the people working in these hospitals and support them, including the management teams. But they've just been dealt a really lousy hand, and so has the Commonwealth. But we'll work through it. I said one last thing, but there is one last thing. I know we asked this question a couple of months ago, but I think, obviously, I assume there's been more thought put into it by you and the Attorney General. Not only has Ralph Della Torre taken out hundreds of millions of dollars from this business, the CEO, who started here and has bought yachts with it and all that sort of thing.
90-foot fishing boat, too.
Right. At the same time, we read the unbelievably painful story in the Boston Globe about a woman whose condition was totally able to be addressed, but the equipment that was needed to save her life was repossessed because Steward hadn't paid its bills. Margie and I, and even though I'm allegedly a lawyer, but not much of one, if there's ever a criminal behavior, it seems to me it's that. Is that being looked into at all, as whether or not there was criminality on the part of Steward or any other leaders?
I can't speak to that. What I can say is that it's an example of the kind of gross behavior that's gone on and what that's resulted in. I mean, stiffing suppliers and vendors, and then, that means that hospitals don't have the right supplies or the needed supplies in certain instances, and with a potentially a tragic outcome, right? I mean, it matters under investigation. But,
okay.
Governor, we were talking when we first got here about whether people thought college was worth it because it's become so expensive to go to college now, even UMass. I got some text messages about the tuition going up here as well. You, correct me if I'm wrong, but the basic thing is you basically said for a lot of jobs in state government, you're not going to need a college degree anymore. It's going to be a skill-based hiring process. Tell people about that.
Well, let me say a couple things. I do think college is wonderful, and I support our colleges and universities. We're lucky to have so many incredible public and private institutions here in Massachusetts. It's also the case that there are a lot of ways to develop and get yourself into a terrific career. And it's, why we've supported all sorts of vocational programs. It's why we've supported career pathways in high school that enable high school students to actually, while going to high school, learn a job or a skill for advanced manufacturing or robotics or another field that they could then go to right after high school. So I think it's not an either or, it's a both and that's what we've got the benefit of doing here in Massachusetts. Now, one of the things we did, and I'm proud this year of being able to do it, is to make community college free to anybody who's 25 and older. I know, wow, right? But it matters. If you know anybody 25 and older that maybe started with some credits but had to leave because somebody got sick or, you know, something happened in their life that took them off that trajectory, now's the time. You can go back and finish out, get that degree for free in a way that's going to set you up for jobs that we need filled today. So I think that's important, and I think you know, making sure that we have a full array of offerings to people is really important as well.
John from Peabody has a related question. John, welcome to the show. You're on with Maura Healey. Welcome.
Hi, Joe and Marjorie, and thank you for taking my call. Governor,
Sure.
Thank you for your time. Both of my kids graduated from Essex Technical High School in Danvers, and I'm on the advisory board there. And one of the big issues is the kids are going out on co-op, working for nurseries and landscapers and so forth. That's the program I was involved in, the landscape program. And they can't get training on equipment like bobcats and excavators and so forth because they cannot get a hoisting or hydraulics license until they're 18. And farms, is my understanding, are exempt, yet this agricultural high school is not, and they can't get the real-world experience without it. And we have brand-new equipment that the school has procured, and the kids can't even practice on it. It's my understanding there may be a bill addressing this, but I'm not sure, and I was just wondering if there's something that can be done to alleviate this problem.
Thank you, John.
John, thanks for the call. You know, John, my grandfather graduated from what was then Essex Aggie. So I love, yeah, and I've been back. It's a very different school. They have and it was when he was there. The beautiful campus, a great example of one of our terrific high schools here in Massachusetts. So I don't know what that legislation is, John, but I certainly understand the rationale behind it. As somebody who grew up on a farm in New Hampshire, I understand a little bit about what you're speaking to. And it goes to the point of how do we set kids up for success? How are we making sure that they are, of course, safely, but, you know, given the skills, given the training, given the tools to set them up for the career that they want to have. So we'll look into that, John, and meanwhile, I wish both your sons well.
We have a recent UMass Boston grad, I think you should applaud that, whose name is Jules, who is ready to ask a question of the governor. Jules, welcome and congratulations.
Hey, Jim. Hey, Marjorie.
Hey.
Thank you, Governor, for being here. And I got a couple questions on housing and transportation, hoping for 200, 300 level answers in a short time. If you want a deluxe monologue, it's available. But on housing and the MBTA Communities Act, we know where that is in terms of legalities right now, Milton, Wakefield. I know your position. I know you're confident in it and the administration. If the SJC doesn't find in your favor, what contingencies do you have, if you have any, to keep participating municipalities in the round? Or is there even a plan B? And then on transportation, we can go back a few weeks, because it's been echoing for a few weeks, just as I can hear my echo right now, trying to coordinate myself. But this Transportation Secretary, those comments about the border tolls, I mean, we have a question from David that was asked here about why you haven't fired her or asked for the resignation for the way that she went about it. It was very straightforward. I think
if I may, Jules, I think 2 is probably plenty. Is that okay with you? Thank you. Could you do me a favor? Thank you, Jules. Would you mind explaining what the MBTA communities thing is that Jules was talking about in case people don't know before you respond?
I appreciate it. Sure, absolutely. And thanks, Jules.
Thank you, Jules.
Nice to see you. So the MBTA Communities Act is a law that was passed nearly unanimously by our legislature a few years ago, signed into law by then Governor Baker. And what it did is it required approximately 177 communities to basically undertake a planning, rezoning process, and it's tiered according to their proximity to transit hubs. But basically the idea was we need more housing. They decided to pass a law that basically gets communities to rezone to create more housing in a community. And again, this was passed unanimously and signed into law a few years ago. it has been now in the process of being implemented, and communities have to come forward with their plan, and some have chosen, not some, but very few have chosen not to, have chosen to fight. Of course, Milton being probably the lead case where the Attorney General has said that she is going to enforce the law, which I support. While, of course, also continuing to work with the town of Milton on a new plan. That's the role of our administration. We'll continue to be at the table and try to help them work through these issues. But the good news, Jules, is for Plan B, you know, communities are doing this already. The vast majority of communities have already taken action to adopt and will now be implementing the MBTA Communities Law. And I think this isn't surprising to me because, you know, anywhere you go, housing costs are high. And I think that most people out there know that we need more housing in the state in order to bring down rents, to bring down costs. And so there's a way to do it. The law allows flexibility to communities in terms of how you rezone it. And our administration will continue to offer technical assistance. We gave Milton $60,000 in technical assistance to help them draw their plan. So we're hopeful that that will still work out there. But you know, I think the good news is the vast majority of communities have already adopted this and are implementing. And that makes sense because I said at the outset, no one of our 351 cities or towns can solve the housing issue on their own. Like everybody's got to participate. Everybody's got to give. Everybody's got to make this work. And we don't want people leaving the state. See, that's the other thing, right? We all want economic growth. We all want prosperity. We want more opportunity. The only way we get that is if we continue to build vibrancy. If we have people leaving the state because they can't afford to live here, that's a problem for our economic growth and development and who we are and what your kids are going to inherit, what your grandkids are going to inherit for opportunity or not here in our great state. So that's why we're doing it. Okay?
How about Jules' question about your Secretary of Transportation suggesting that border tolls on the way to New Hampshire might be a way to go? You weren't happy, apparently.
Well, as I expressed, I had a different view on that. I grew up on the border, as I say, in New Hampshire, so I oppose tolls on the border. I support my Secretary of Transportation and the work that she and our Department of Transportation are doing. In fact, today, you know, I stood with her and others as we were giving out like $400 million in money for roads and bridges and infrastructure, important work that communities need to do. But I already addressed the Secretary's comments on that, which I strongly disagreed with.
But you know, may I ask you one thing about that? I mean, we have people that come in to Boston to work on the Mass Pike every day, and they have to pay a toll. People come in from New Hampshire to work in Massachusetts or work in Boston. Why is it, when we have this huge problem with funding the T, why is it just missed out of hand, tolls from New Hampshire? They're getting a lot of benefit by working in Boston and not paying Massachusetts prices.
You know, I think that when it comes to revenues and financing of transportation and what our needs are, a few things need to happen. One of the things is I set up a task force to look at this issue, to look at what is it that we need to do in our transportation system and how are we going to pay for it? What are the existing revenue streams that we have? And then what are other options, menu of options of tools that policymakers could consider? And so those ideas, toolkit, recommendations, they'll come to me later this year. I've asked for them by the end of the year. So we'll see what this diverse group of stakeholders has to say when it comes to financing.
That's the last question before we take a break that maybe Jules was going to. Well, the thing that surprised me about your rejecting out of hand what the Secretary had suggested is you appointed this task force. Maybe the task force is going to come to you, Governor, and say, I think there should be tolls on the border, and here are the 42 reasons why it's a great idea. Are you saying they shouldn't even contemplate that?
I'm just speaking as me.
Okay.
Little old me as governor. That was my view.
Little
as I sit here
governor.
today, you know, look, I'm trying to drive affordability, making Massachusetts more competitive, making us more equitable, right? So tolls at the border are not on my agenda. You know, the financing task force will see what they come forward with. I thought it was important to set that up, and as I say, we've got a diverse group of stakeholders and thoughtful people on there, so we'll see what they come forward with, Jim.
That's the voice of the Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Maura Healey. She's going to be with us to the top of the hour. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from UMass Boston in Dorchester. If you want to reach us by phone or text, the number's 877-301-8970, or you can come down here to the homie mic at UMass Boston and ask the governor a question yourself. Be right back.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, our Arts and Culture Week in Review. Next year, Boston will host its first public art triennial, turning city streets into an outdoor museum and featuring 15 commissions from local, national, and international artists. Plus, we'll look at the Tony nominations, and in the battle of Kendrick Lamar versus Drake, Lamar escalates the feud, dropping his diss track, Euphoria. That's today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And North Shore Music Theater. Audiences can experience the true story and musical journey of Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons. Jersey Boys comes to Bill Haney's North Shore Music Theater May 7th through May 19th. Tickets at nsmt.org. And Music Worcester, presenting Tessa Lark and Frank Vignola, performing an evening recalling the infectious hot club sounds of Django Reinhardt and Stefan Grappelli. Saturday, May 18th at Tuckerman Hall. Tickets at musicworcester.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are live at UMass Boston. We thank UMass Boston and the Chancellor for inviting us today. Joining us till the top of the hour and the end of the show is the Governor of the Commonwealth. If you want to, well, the lines are full. If you want to text her, it's 877-301-8970, Marjorie.
Let us go to Sarah in Millis. Thank you for calling, Sarah.
Hey, Sarah.
I call. I'm calling because I'm sure the governor is aware that during the last year of the Baker administration, he raised out-of-district tuition sped costs by 14%, which was mandated to all cities and towns. And it went up again another 2% this year. However, circuit breaker reimbursement and money provided by the state to towns that aren't gateway towns or don't have a lot of commercial business they're really struggling. And currently right now, Millis has a deficit of $1 million, and we're faced with the either passing a Proposition 2.5 override to the taxpayers or laying off 15 full-time employees with the school. So I'm just wondering if the governor has anything in her budget or considered to up the reimbursement costs to cities and towns in order to maintain the teachers and education level that we have in the towns that aren't getting the additional money for being gateway town or high commercial business.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah. Sarah, thanks so much for the call. And that's something that the Lieutenant Governor and I have heard from a number of communities about. And, again, we're all experiencing this moment of higher costs, higher prices, inflation, things have gone up. And, it's something that we recognize right now. And we have some formulas that may or may not work for certain communities, and that includes the education funding formula. I'll tell you this, Sarah, we are really focused on it. We did some things this year. There's a municipal reform law that we proposed, and we're going to continue to look at ways that we can work with and help our municipalities and our communities. We do make sure that with the money coming in from the surtax, that it is going to go according to the voters' wishes for education and for transportation, and that's why we were able to propose historic levels of funding for education in the past year and significant levels this year as well. So I completely appreciate what Sarah is saying and identifying as an issue. There's a lot more pinch and hurt on these communities right now, and we've got to find a way to all work together and work through this.
Can you spend 60 seconds and tell us about this climate bank home loan thing and who's eligible and how it works, if you can?
Yeah, climate, as you know, we are all in on climate. Going to the Vatican later this month to talk about some of our initiatives. My economic development bill leans heavily into climate technology as the next big, great investment for our state. One of the other things that we did under the leadership of Chief Hoffer, our climate chief, Countries First, who I know you had on a couple weeks ago,
We did indeed.
is to create a climate bank. And this is a the country's very first green bank that is dedicated solely towards affordable housing. This week, we launched our first consumer product, and what it does right now is allow for low and moderate income homeowners to apply for loans to make their homes more energy efficient, to make upgrades at a lower cost. So that's really great, really cool. You're going to be able to do things like take out a loan that will help you replace your roof, install heat pumps, weatherize your home, install solar panels, and the like. It's administered through Mass Housing, and it's a great program that is out there. Also includes purchasing battery storage or EV charging stations. You can head over to massclimatebank.com to learn more about this and to apply. We've allocated $20 million for this program with a goal of committing up to 1,000 loans over the next 2 years.
Thanks.
You know, Governor, we're getting a lot of texts about the migrant crisis. There's been a lot of people from out of the country who've moved here from their countries. This is happening all over the United States. Most of them are about how you're going to deal with the cost of sustaining the migrants here. Unsustainable, says one texter. Will you limit services to migrants, raise taxes, or cut other state services?
Yep. We've talked about this before. This is a challenge. It's a challenge that Massachusetts is dealing with. It's not a challenge that Massachusetts created. It is something created because of an inaction by the federal government and particularly by Congress on this issue. And it's also the product of some really troubling geopolitical forces that are causing people to flee countries in Central and South America and places like Haiti right now that are ravaged by war and all sorts of things going on that are just causing people to leave with their kids and literally risk their lives to try to find some measure of safety. They're coming across in numbers that we haven't seen before. I've spoken about this before. You know, there was a deal 3 months ago now on the table in Congress. It was going to reform some of the border policies. It was going to make some changes to the asylum process. It was going to provide more assets and agents and resources to strengthen security at the border. And it was also going to provide funding to states like Massachusetts, who've had to deal with housing the number of new immigrants into our states. As we know, that bill was sealed, delivered, ready to go, except that Donald Trump said there shall be no deal before the election, and then everybody, the Republicans, walked away. It's a damn shame. It really is. But we are where we are, and we're managing the situation as best we can. Just for clarity out there for the public, we talk about the high price tag for what's called our emergency shelter system, our housing system here in the state. I want people to understand that more than half of the families who are in that emergency shelter system are not immigrant families, are not migrant families. They're actually Massachusetts families who've fallen on hard times and have needed, with the cost of housing going up, have needed emergency shelter. So over half of those families that we're paying for are Massachusetts families. Now, one thing I've been really focused on is making clear that we've reached capacity here. It's why I put and imposed a wait list many months ago on this and a cap on our emergency shelter system for new immigrants into Massachusetts. It's also why I have focused on getting people working. We are the only state to have processed the number of people for work authorizations that we have processed. Over 3,600 people have been processed, of approximately 7,500 adults who've entered Massachusetts as immigrants. 3,600 of them have been processed. Nearly all of them have gotten work authorizations. They're here lawfully, they're able to work, and we're focused on getting them plugged in to employers as we speak. And hundreds and hundreds of people are now at work as a result. So, that's how I'm trying to manage the situation. And, I continue to call on the federal government to act and to take the steps that they need to take.
Speaking of calling on the federal government and the migrant situation, we had Marcela Garcia from the Globe editorial page on the other day, and she had written a piece about how she believed the president should extend, which he has the power to do, temporary protected status for Haitian immigrants who are already here in this country, so they're not at risk to deportation, particularly if they're from Port-au-Prince, to a really dangerous place. He has yet to do that. Do you support the extension of TPS for Haitians who are here?
It's interesting because, my focus as governor has been how do you take care of and fulfill your legal obligation as a right to shelter state to care for the people who are here, who have come. And that's why I'm so focused on getting people working, getting people housing. You get people working, they're going to be able to better afford and get into housing. It's also why I've really leaned into community organizations, service providers, churches, faith leaders, right, who have taken families in. I mean, we really need that. We need that help. So that's really been my focus, and not, not on what that means in terms of status. The numbers that we have here right now, remember, these people are here lawfully. They've been allowed in. They're here lawfully. And they're just really, really high numbers.
You know, one other thing we're getting a lot in the text today, and people talk about this in terms of the granny flats or whatever the proper name. What do they call them?
Accessory dwelling.
Accessory dwelling. That's right.
ADUs.
Yeah, people are worried that what's going to happen is investors are going to buy these houses and they're going to rent out the ADUs. And then several people are asking whether there's anything to be done about investors buying up homes, period, and causing the cost of housing to skyrocket.
I'm not worried about that. I mean, right now, look at downtown Boston. Investors are already buying up. They're the only ones who can afford housing. What ADUs do is allow you as a homeowner in your community to go out and turn that garage into an additional apartment that you can rent out, that you can have a family member live in, that you can put your mother-in-law in, your father-in-law in, right? That's what ADUs do. So let's not confuse the situation. I mean, that's what this is about.
Okay.
And, back on part of the situation with a number of Massachusetts families in our shelter system right now, and I understand it's hard. I mean, taxpayers, we pay for this. There's a law in our state that requires us to cover families in this situation. We don't have housing to move them to. We don't have apartments that are affordable enough. Even when we have vouchers, there just aren't enough of them. We just don't have enough housing stock. And so for me, so much of this, it all comes back to housing.
You should be a little more forthcoming. The reason Marjorie brought it up, she's convinced, she's hoping her kids are going to put her in an ADU rather than on a pizza ice and push her out to sea.
But
Can we?
Okay, go ahead.
Let's go to Alexa, who is a staff member here at UMass Boston. She's got a question for the Governor, Maura Healey. Alexa, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So like Jim said, my name is Alexa McPherson. I'm the current president of the Classified Staff Union. And with you being a public sector graduate, one of the big things is that you likely know through your education that staff are vital to the mission of public higher education. And so I have a few friends here. And so with that in mind, though, our working conditions are getting worse and worse, suffering severe pay cuts, job cuts, unfair, unequal pay and benefits between different unions and collective bargaining units, not just within this own campus, but as a whole across higher education. So focusing on that, it's making it impossible for many workers to live in the community that they work in. Like in my unit, for example, the lowest paid wage earner makes $50,005 before taxes, before the exorbitant health care costs are taken out, and that is just not a livable wage in this time, in this city, in this state
Alexa,
as a whole.
Can you ask the question you have for the
yes.
Governor, if you don't mind? Thank you.
Yep. So with that in mind, since you control the collective bargaining unit, and between you and your cabinet, you have offered us pretty good raises over the last year going into next round. What are you willing to do for us, given the incredible inflation rates we're all suffering, to bring us even higher up and really give us a living, equitable wage for these times right now that we are all suffering through?
Thanks, Alexa.
Thanks, Alexa. I'll tell you, one thing I'm going to do is work to make sure we pass that housing bond bill, because one of the things we need to cut are your costs around housing right now, and bring down the cost of rent, bring down the cost of housing. We did do something that hadn't been done in many, many, many years. We actually did a significant wage increase with all of our unions last year.
And we're thankful for that.
No, and I appreciate that. And, you know, that was bargained in good faith. And we know how important wages are. And all of our public employees deserve, Alexa, livable wages. It's also the case that we're struggling right now with a revenue picture. We're working through that. But I hear you. We'll continue to bargain in good faith with all of our unions. We have to watch what the revenue picture looks like. In the meantime, you know, it's important to me that we do what we can to make sure that we're driving down the cost of childcare, driving down the cost of housing, driving down the costs of education generally. And that's why, you know, something that will allow people to go back to community college for free, maybe to get them into a position that, you know, pays a little bit more. All these things are pieces of it. I understand, Alexa, it's never going to be enough or fast enough, but know that we're committed to trying to do all we can to support our public employees.
Alexa, thank you for your
Thank
questions.
you.
Really appreciate it.
You know, Governor, when you say fast enough, I don't get that there's a sense of urgency in the legislature. You know, this bond bill's been there for I don't know how long, quite a while now. I was reading one of these stories this morning. It's small, but it's significant, that 200 some extra houses could be added up at Fort Devens, and that's not happening because it has to go through some procedure or okay or something like that. It doesn't seem like there's urgency. Why should it take them another 3 months to get this thing out of there up on Beacon Hill?
Well, look, I just look back at the last year and the things that we were able to do. You know, the budget that we were able to pass, Mass Reconnect with Free Community College, universal school meals. You know, we were able to get a lot done over the last year. And, you know, right now these things are moving. They're in conference. I know the housing bond bill is in conference. I've got a hearing on the economic development bill that I filed next week. Looking forward to that. As I say, I'm really leaning into making Massachusetts the global hub of climate technology, just like we did for life sciences. We're poised to be the global hub for climate technology. We've got companies here. We've got the research here. Everything sort of here to help grow the companies that are going to be responsible for decarbonization and for climate mitigation. So, you know, for me, like, I'm really pleased to see that that's getting a hearing next week. And you know, we're going to continue to work with our legislative partners and leadership on moving the ball forward for all of Massachusetts.
You know, Governor, I know you we talked to you about a lot on a tax cut, which you achieved. It's one of the other things you got in your first term.
Oh, yeah, that we got that done, too. First time in 20 years, Jim.
But do you, well, I don't know how well this question is going to go over. Do you regret that at all? I mean, we've had revenue decline issues. There had to be some cutting of the budget. Luckily, the voters approved the millionaire's tax, or whatever you want to call it, without which we'd be in real trouble. But would it not have been better to have waited a little bit and seen what the fiscal situation was?
No.
Why not?
No, because first of all, that, you know, everything was paid for in what we did last year in the budget, long before the cut. And I'll tell you, that cutting taxes, it means a lot. This year, because we cut taxes, seniors got an additional $1,200. It went from $1,200 to $2,400 on the senior circuit tax breaker. That's a big deal. So I don't regret helping seniors, you know. I don't regret that tax cut meant that Massachusetts has the most generous child and family tax credit in the entire country. That helps a lot of families, right, and lower income families. So that's really important. I'm glad that we cut the estate tax some, that we cut capital gains some. These are important because, again, you know, though I grew up there, I don't want people moving to New Hampshire. So these are things that we needed to do. We do have additional money coming in through the surtax. We made good use of it this year and kept a true promise to the voters, which is to make sure that that money is going for transportation and education. And we'll continue to make sure that's the case. But, you know, it is always the case, Jim, that we've got to manage, you know, the House fiscally and, you know, I don't mean the House of Representatives. I mean manage our proverbial house and our budget, and that's what we're working to do. You know, with the spending decisions that we're making. I also want to distinguish, though, between something like a housing bond bill or economic development bond bill, which are not budget expenses. They are investments. They are vehicles that allow us to use our great bond rating, credit rating right now, to go out and borrow money to make the investments that we need to make. I'm proposing a $1.3 billion investment in climate technology. Why? Because we just had a report done by the Donahue Institute at UMass, which showed that if Massachusetts, if we make this investment in climate technology to help these companies, to help these entrepreneurs, to help our research institutions, we are going to see a $16 billion return, more than $16 billion return. That's a 12-to-1 return on investment for that, and that's a pretty good return. So, you know, that's use of bond money and an investment versus some of the expenses that we're talking through when we're talking about a budget.
We only have 30 seconds left. 30. How do you react to the Republican candidate for governor taking the lowest of low roads and tweeting, unlike the Massachusetts governor, "I don't tolerate soft on crime policies"? That'd be Kelly Ayotte.
I didn't see that. What?
Well, she said it.
I don't know. I was
Unlike the Massachusetts governor, I don't tolerate soft on crime. She's running against you more than she's running against.
I know, it's kind of
the
interesting
Democratic
because I'm
candidate.
not running in New Hampshire. I'm just trying to run the
fine.
state to the best of my
Okay, fine.
ability. What I will say is I was as you know, I was a prosecutor and I was for 8 years an attorney general pursuing criminal charges and you know, taking action for a good number of years. So that's just, it doesn't make any sense to me on its face.
Nice to see you, Governor
Governor
Healey.
Healey.
Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
your time.
Thank
We
you. Thank
appreciate
you
By
it.
the
very
way,
much.
for New Hampshire, that race is important. And if you don't want to be a state like Florida right now with extreme abortion laws, you better get out and vote for the Democrat in New Hampshire in this gubernatorial election, because abortion and democracy, so much is on the line.
Thank you very much, Governor Maura Healey.